The fluorescent lights in Cook County Hospital's emergency room buzzed with their familiar electric hum at 2:47 a.m. Marcus Thompson adjusted his navy scrubs and grabbed another cup of lukewarm coffee from the break room. At 28, he'd been working night shifts for 3 years, and the rhythm of Chicago's busiest public hospital had become second nature to him. "Marcus, bed 7 needs vitals," called out Dr. Sarah Chen, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of another Friday night in the ER. As he approached bed 7, Marcus noticed the family immediately. A woman in her 30s clutching a small girl to her chest, both of them trembling despite the hospital's stifling heat. The man beside them paced nervously, his work boots squeaking against the linoleum floor. His hands were stained with concrete dust, suggesting he'd come straight from a construction site. "Habla español?" Marcus asked gently, his college Spanish. Rusty but functional. The woman's eyes filled with relief. "Sí, un poco, my daughter. She has fever for 3 days. Very hot." Marcus knelt to the little girl's eye level. She couldn't have been older than 8, with dark curls matted against her feverish forehead. Her name, he learned, was Sofia, and despite her illness she managed a shy smile when he made funny faces while taking her temperature. 103.2, Marcus murmured, making notes on his tablet. "When did the fever start?" The father, Miguel, answered in broken English mixed with Spanish. "Monday night. We wait. We hope it get better. But tonight she shakes so much." Marcus noticed how the parents exchanged worried glances every time he asked about insurance or identification. Their answers were vague, nervous. The mother, Eleanor, kept her purse clutched tightly, as if protecting something valuable inside. Dr. Chen arrived to examine Sofia, and Marcus translated between English and Spanish, watching the family's anxiety peak every time official procedures were mentioned. When the doctor recommended overnight observation and IV antibiotics, Miguel's face went pale. "The money," Miguel whispered to his wife in Spanish, not realizing Marcus understood. "We don't have insurance papers." After Dr. Chen left, Marcus found himself lingering by their bedside longer than necessary. Something about their quiet desperation reminded him of his own childhood, the uncertainty, the fear of systems designed to help, but often intimidating to navigate. "Listen," Marcus said quietly, glancing around to make sure no administrators were within earshot. "There are programs, financial assistance. Let me see what I can do." For the next 2 hours, Marcus made calls between his other patients. He contacted the hospital's patient advocate, researched emergency Medicaid applications, and even called his friend Jamie, who worked in social services. By dawn, he'd managed to secure temporary coverage for Sofia's treatment. When he returned to tell the family the good news, he found Elena crying softly while Sofia slept. Miguel was staring out the window at the Chicago skyline, probably wondering how they'd gotten here, to this moment of complete vulnerability in a foreign country. "It's taken care of," Marcus said simply. "Sofia can stay. The IV will help with the infection." Elena grabbed his hand, her eyes overflowing with gratitude. "Gracias, Marcos, Dios te bendiga." As his shift ended and Marcus walked through the hospital parking garage toward his Honda Civic, he couldn't shake the image of Sofia's small hand in his when he'd checked her pulse. Something about that family had gotten under his skin in a way that surprised him. He had no idea that this single act of kindness, staying late, making a few phone calls, bending a few rules, would completely change the trajectory of his life. The Chicago morning sun was rising over Lake Michigan as Marcus drove home to his studio apartment in Lincoln Park, thinking about a little girl named Sofia and wondering if her fever had broken yet. 3 days later, Marcus was pulling a double shift when he saw Elena rushing through the ER doors alone, panic written across her face. Her hair was disheveled, and she kept looking over her shoulder as if being followed. "Sofia está en la escuela," she said breathlessly when she spotted Marcus. "But Miguel, they took Miguel." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Who took him? The police?" "ICE," Elena whispered, the 3 letters carrying the weight of every immigrant family's worst nightmare. "This morning, at the construction site, someone..." "Call them." Marcus guided Elena to a quiet corner near the vending machines, away from the busy triage area. His nursing supervisor, Carol, noticed and raised an eyebrow, but Marcus waved her off. "Do you have a lawyer?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Elena shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "We save money for lawyer. But Sofia's medicine, the rent, there's nothing left. What about Sofia? Where is she now?" "At school, but they want to meet with me tomorrow, about absences when Sofia was sick." Elena's voice broke. "I don't know what to do. If they ask questions—" Marcus had seen this scenario play out before in the ER. Families torn apart by a system that seemed designed to catch people in impossible situations. But he'd never been personally involved, never felt responsible for what happened next. "Elena, listen to me. There are organizations that help, legal aid societies. I can make some calls." That afternoon, Marcus spent his lunch break researching immigration lawyers and family services. He called the National Immigration Law Center, the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and even reached out to a church group his co-worker had mentioned. What he learned wasn't encouraging. With Miguel detained, Elena would likely struggle to prove she could support Sofia alone. If she couldn't navigate the complex web of social services, housing assistance, and legal requirements quickly enough, Child Protective Services might step in. When Marcus returned to work the next evening, Elena was waiting for him in the hospital lobby. Sofia sat beside her, coloring in a book that looked like it had been used many times before. "The school," Elena said quietly. "They ask too many questions. About Miguel, about our address, about doctor visits." Marcus knelt down to Sofia's level. "Hey there, remember me? How are you feeling?" Sofia smiled shyly and showed him her coloring page, a family of stick figures holding hands in front of a house. "Papa is at work," she said in careful English. "Far away work." Elena's eyes filled with tears at her daughter's innocence. Marcus felt something twist in his chest, a responsibility he hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. "Elena, there's something we need to talk about," Marcus said gently. "About what might happen if things don't work out with Miguel's situation." That night, Marcus found himself researching emergency guardianship procedures and foster care requirements. He told himself he was just being thorough, just trying to understand all the options so he could better help the family. But deep down, he was starting to realize that sometimes just helping meant being prepared for scenarios you never imagined. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Elena had been scheduled for her own immigration hearing. If it didn't go well, Sofia might find herself completely alone. As Marcus drove to work that evening, he couldn't stop thinking about Sofia's drawing, a little girl who still believed her family would stay together, no matter what. The call came during Marcus's Thursday night shift. Elena's voice was barely recognizable through her tears. "Marcus, they won't let me take Sofia home." He found them in the pediatric waiting area of the hospital, not as patients this time, but as two people with nowhere else to go. Sofia was asleep across 3 plastic chairs, covered by Marcus's spare jacket from his locker. Elena sat beside her, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "What happened?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair across from them. "The caseworker, she came to the apartment today, said someone called about Sofia missing school." When I explain, "About Miguel, about the immigration hearing," Elena's voice caught. "She said Sofia needs stable environment. She gave me papers, said I have 48 hours to prove I can provide for her alone." Marcus looked at the documents Elena handed him. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. Prove financial stability, provide documentation of legal residency status, demonstrate adequate housing arrangements, or Sofia would be placed in emergency foster care pending further review. "Elena, some of these requirements, without Miguel's income, without legal status." Marcus trailed off, not wanting to voice what they both knew. "I clean houses," Elena said desperately. 4 families, good families, but they pay cash, no papers. The caseworker says this is not documented employment." Sofia stirred in her sleep, mumbling something in Spanish about wanting to go home. Marcus watched her small face, peaceful despite the chaos surrounding her life. "There has to be something," Marcus said. "Let me call Jamie. She works in family services. Maybe she knows someone who can help." But when Marcus called Jamie the next morning, her response was what he'd feared. "Marcus, I know you want to help, but the system is overwhelmed. If Elena can't prove stability quickly, Sofia will enter protective custody. That's just how it works." "For how long?" "Could be weeks, could be months. Depends on what happens with the parents' immigration cases and whether any relatives come forward." Marcus found himself asking a question he'd never imagined. What if someone else wanted to help, temporarily, just until the family situation gets resolved? Jamie's pause was telling. "You mean foster care?" "Marcus, you know that's a huge commitment. Background checks, home studies, training classes, but I'm just asking hypothetically. Emergency placements can happen fast if there's a suitable temporary guardian. But Marcus," Jamie's voice took on a warning tone, "getting attached to a case like this, it doesn't usually end the way you hope." That afternoon, Marcus did something he'd never done before. He called in sick to work. Instead, he spent the day at the courthouse with Elena, helping her navigate the immigration attorney's office, the social services building, and the maze of paperwork that seemed designed to exhaust people into giving up. By evening, the reality was undeniable. Elena's immigration hearing was scheduled for the following week. Even in the best-case scenario, it would take months to resolve. Miguel's detention could last even longer, and Sofia couldn't wait in limbo indefinitely. "Marcus," Elena said as they sat in his car outside her apartment building, "if something happens to me, if they send me back, will you make sure Sofia is okay?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus looked up at the apartment building where Sofia was probably doing homework or watching TV, completely unaware that her world was about to change forever. "Elena, please, just promise me you'll make sure she's okay." Marcus stared at the steering wheel, knowing that what Elena was really asking was whether he'd be willing to become the most important person in a little girl's life. "I promise," he heard himself say. Neither of them realized that within 72 hours, those words would become Sofia's only anchor in a world that was about to fall apart completely. The phone call came at 6:23 a.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus was just getting home from his night shift when his phone rang with an unknown number. "Mr. Thompson? This is Linda Rodriguez from the Department of Children and Family Services." "I understand. You've been in contact with the Hernandez family." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. "Yes, is everything okay? Elena Hernandez was taken into custody last night following her immigration hearing. Sofia is currently at our emergency placement facility, but she's been asking for you specifically. She says you're Marcus from the hospital, and that her mother said you would help." The world seemed to tilt. Marcus sat down hard on his couch, still in his scrubs. "She's 8 years old. She must be terrified." "Mr. Thompson, I understand you work at Cook County Hospital, and you've expressed interest in potentially providing temporary care." Yes. What does that mean exactly?" "It means we need to move fast. Sofia needs a placement today, and she's already traumatized. If you're serious about this, we can expedite the emergency guardian process, but I need to know right now if you're committed." Marcus closed his eyes, thinking about Sofia's shy smile, her drawing of the stick figure family, the way she'd held his hand when he checked her pulse that first night. "I'm committed," he said. The next 8 hours were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and interviews. Marcus called his supervisor at the hospital to request emergency leave. He contacted his landlord about adding Sofia to his lease. He even called his mother in Detroit, stumbling through an explanation of how he'd become responsible for a child he'd known for less than 2 weeks. "Marcus, honey," his mother said gently, "are you sure you know what you're getting into?" "No," Marcus admitted, "but I know what happens to her if I don't step up." By 3 p.m., Marcus was sitting in a sterile DCFS office waiting to meet with Sofia. When the caseworker brought her out, his heart broke. The confident little girl who'd shown him her coloring book was gone, replaced by a scared child, clutching a small backpack that apparently contained everything she owned. "Sofia, do you remember Marcus from the hospital?" Linda Rodriguez asked. Gently, Sofia nodded, her eyes wide. "Where's Mama?" Marcus knelt down to her level, the same way he'd done that first night in the ER. "Sofia, your mama had to go away for a while, but she asked me to take care of you until she comes back." "Like a sleepover?" "Kind of like that," Marcus said, not wanting to explain the complexity of immigration detention to an 8-year-old. The drive to Marcus's Lincoln Park apartment was quiet. Sofia sat in the back seat. Marcus had bought a car seat that morning, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. "Marcus?" she said softly as they pulled into his building's parking garage. "Yeah? Will you teach me more English? Mama says English is important here." Marcus felt something break open in his chest. "Of course I will." That night, as Sofia fell asleep on Marcus's couch, he'd ordered a toddler bed online, but it wouldn't arrive until tomorrow. He sat in his kitchen staring at his phone. He had 17 missed calls from the hospital, 4 voicemails from his mother, and a text from Jamie that simply said, "Are you okay?" Marcus looked through the doorway at Sofia, clutching a stuffed animal Elena had packed in her backpack. She'd cried for her mother at bedtime, and Marcus had held her until she exhausted herself into sleep. He typed back to Jamie, "I think I just became a dad." Outside, Chicago hummed with its usual nighttime energy, but inside Marcus's small apartment, everything had changed. A nurse who'd simply wanted to help a family in crisis was now responsible for a little girl's entire world. The emergency placement paperwork said, "temporary." But as Marcus watched Sofia sleep, he was beginning to understand that some kinds of temporary could last forever. 2 weeks into their new life together, Marcus was discovering that caring for Sofia was nothing like the pediatric nursing he did at the hospital. At work, children had parents who made the big decisions. At home, every choice, from what cereal to buy to which school Sofia should attend, fell squarely on his shoulders. "Marcus, I don't like this cereal," Sofia announced over breakfast, pushing away her bowl of Cheerios. "What kind do you usually eat?" Marcus asked, realizing he'd never thought to ask. "Mama makes me eggs. With cheese." Marcus looked at his kitchen counter, where an unopened box of Pop-Tarts sat next to instant oatmeal packets, the extent of his breakfast cooking skills. "Okay, let's figure out eggs." 20 minutes later, they were both laughing at Marcus's scrambled attempt at scrambled eggs, which had somehow turned into what Sofia diplomatically called yellow soup. "Maybe we need cooking lessons," Marcus suggested. "Can we call Mama and ask her?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Eleanor had been moved to a detention facility in Wisconsin, and phone calls were limited and expensive. Every conversation left Sofia more confused about when her parents would come home. "How? About we look up a video online?" Marcus suggested instead. That afternoon, Marcus took Sofia shopping for school supplies. Her temporary enrollment at Francis Parker Elementary had been expedited thanks to the DCFS caseworker, but Sofia would be starting mid-semester, not knowing anyone. In the store, Sofia gravitated toward a backpack covered in butterflies. "Mama says butterflies mean hope," she said, tracing the design with her finger. "Then butterflies it is," Marcus said, adding it to their cart along with notebooks, pencils, and a lunchbox. "Marcus," Sofia said as they stood in line, "at school, what do I say when they ask about my mama and papa?" Marcus felt unprepared for these moments, the questions that required delicate honesty. "You can say they're not able to be here right now, but that you're staying with me because we're taking care of each other." "Like a family?" Marcus paused, looking down at this little girl who'd somehow become the center of his world in just 2 weeks. "Yeah, Sofia, like a family." That evening, after Sofia was in bed, Marcus called Jamie to update her on how things were going. "You sound exhausted," Jamie observed. "I am. I had no idea how much mental energy it takes just to make sure another person is okay all the time." "Welcome to parenthood. How's she doing emotionally?" Marcus looked toward the living room where Sofia had fallen asleep on the couch again, despite having her own bed now. She still preferred to sleep where she could see him. She has nightmares. About ICE agents, about being alone. Last night she woke up crying because she forgot what her dad's voice sounded like. That's normal for kids in her situation. Have you thought about counseling? The caseworker mentioned it. I keep hoping this will be temporary, that Elena and Miguel will get their cases resolved and Sofia can go home. Jamie's silence was telling. "What?" Marcus asked. "Marcus, you know I support what you're doing, but these immigration cases, they take years sometimes, and kids need stability. You might want to start thinking about this as less temporary than you originally planned." After hanging up, Marcus stood in his bathroom brushing his teeth and staring at the photo Sofia had taped to his mirror, the stick figure family drawing she'd made that first night in the hospital. She'd added a new figure recently, a tall, stick person with dark skin and scrubs who was labeled Marcus in careful 8-year-old handwriting. Looking at that drawing, Marcus realized Jamie was right. Somewhere between scrambled eggs and butterfly backpacks, somewhere between nightmares and bedtime stories, this had stopped being about temporary help. This had become about building a life together, one day at a time. 6 weeks into their routine, Marcus thought they'd found their rhythm. Sofia was adjusting to school, making friends, and her nightmares were becoming less frequent. Then Linda Rodriguez called with news that changed everything. "Marcus, we need to meet. There's been a development in Sofia's case." They met at a coffee shop near the hospital, Sofia coloring at a nearby table while the adults talked. Linda's expression was serious as she opened her case file. "Elena's immigration case isn't going well. Her hearing was postponed again, and now there's talk of deportation proceedings. But that's not the biggest issue." Marcus felt his stomach clench. "What is?" "Miguel has a brother in Phoenix who's come forward. He's a U.S. citizen, married, with 2 kids of his own. He's petitioned for custody of Sofia." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He looked over at Sofia, who was carefully coloring inside the lines of a butterfly in her coloring book, completely unaware that her future was being decided 20 feet away. "But Sofia doesn't know him," Marcus said. "She's never even mentioned an uncle." "That doesn't matter legally. Blood relatives take priority over non-family guardians, especially when there are questions about permanent placement." "What kind of questions?" Linda hesitated. "Marcus, you've done an amazing job with Sofia, but the system has concerns about single male guardians for young girls. Add to that the fact that you're not married, you work night shifts, and you've known Sofia for less than 2 months. I've known her long enough to know that she's happy here. She's thriving. You can ask her teachers, her therapist, anyone. I believe you. But the uncle's lawyer is arguing that Sofia would be better served in a traditional family environment, with relatives who share her cultural background." Marcus felt like the ground was shifting beneath him. When would this happen? If his petition is approved within the month. That night, Marcus struggled with how to talk to Sofia about the possibility of moving to Arizona. He finally decided to wait, hoping the petition would be denied, and she'd never have to know how close she'd come to being uprooted again. But Sofia was smarter than he gave her credit for. "Marcus, are you sad?" she asked the next morning over breakfast, eggs that were actually scrambled properly this time. "Why do you ask?" "You look how Mama looked when she was worried about Papa." Marcus sat down across from her, realizing he couldn't protect her from everything. "Sofia, there might be some changes coming. Your Papa has a brother in Arizona who wants to meet you." Sofia's face scrunched up in confusion. "Tio Roberto, but he doesn't call us. Mama says he lives far away." "Sometimes family situations are complicated," Marcus said carefully, "but I live here now, with you. This is my home." The simple statement broke Marcus's heart. To Sofia, home had become this small apartment with the butterfly decorations they'd put up together, the kitchen table where they did homework every night, the couch where they watched movies on weekends. That afternoon, Marcus called the one person he trusted most for legal advice, his college roommate David, who was now a family law attorney in Boston. "Marcus, I have to be honest with you," David said after hearing the situation. "Blood relatives almost always win in these cases, especially when they can provide what courts consider a traditional family structure. What are my options?" "You could contest the petition, but it would be expensive and your chances aren't great. Unless what? Unless you were willing to make this permanent. Adoption proceedings create a different legal framework. The court would have to consider Sofia's best interests and her own preferences. Marcus felt his world tilt again. Adoption. The word carried weight he hadn't expected. David, I never planned to be a father. This all started because I just wanted to help a family in crisis. And now? Marcus looked around his apartment, seeing it through Sofia's eyes. The pictures she'd drawn taped to the refrigerator, her school, artwork displayed on the coffee table, her small shoes lined up next to his by the door. Now I can't imagine my life without her. That night, as Sofia fell asleep holding his hand, a routine that had developed during her nightmares, Marcus stared at the ceiling and wondered if love was always this complicated. In the morning, he would call Linda Rodriguez and ask what it would take to start adoption proceedings, but tonight he just wanted to memorize the sound of Sofia's peaceful breathing and the weight of her small hand in his. The adoption paperwork was more complex than Marcus had imagined. Sitting in attorney Sarah Kim's office, he felt overwhelmed by the stack of forms, requirements, and legal procedures laid out before him. The good news, Sarah explained, is that Sofia has been in your care for 2 months with documented stability and progress. The challenging news is that we're essentially racing against her uncle's custody petition. What does that mean, practically? It means we need to demonstrate that adoption by you is in Sofia's best interest, even over placement with blood relatives. We'll need character references, home studies, psychological evaluations, and most importantly, Sofia's own testimony about what she wants. Marcus thought about the 8-year-old currently at school, probably eating lunch with her new friends, completely unaware that adults were fighting over her future in conference rooms across the city. How do we prove I'm the better choice? We document everything. Your relationship with Sofia, her adjustment to life with you, her academic progress, emotional stability. We also need to show that you're committed to maintaining her cultural connections and that you can provide long-term stability. The next few weeks became a whirlwind of appointments and evaluations. Marcus arranged for character references from his supervisor at the hospital, Sofia's teachers, and even Dr. Chen, who had treated Sofia that first night. He underwent background checks, financial reviews, and psychological assessments. The hardest part was the home study visit from Mrs. Patterson, a social worker who seemed determined to find fault with Marcus's parenting. Mr. Thompson, Sofia is a Latina child. How do you plan to preserve her cultural identity? Marcus gestured to the Spanish-English books they'd been reading together, the photos of Sofia's parents displayed prominently in the living room, the traditional Mexican food. He'd been learning to cook, badly but with Sofia's patient guidance. We talk about her parents every day. I'm learning Spanish and Sofia is teaching me about her family's traditions. She's not losing her identity, she's adding to it. And your work schedule. Night shifts aren't ideal for a school-age child. I've requested a transfer to day shifts. It's been approved pending the outcome of these proceedings. Mrs. Patterson made notes without expression. What about discipline? How do you handle behavioral issues? Marcus thought about the few times Sofia had tested boundaries, refusing to do homework, having meltdowns about missing her parents. We talk through problems. Sofia responds better to understanding than punishment. She's dealing with trauma, not being defiant. After Mrs. Patterson left, Marcus found Sofia in her room, quietly organizing her art supplies. Was that lady deciding? If I can stay, Sofia asked without looking up. Marcus sat on her bed, amazed again by her perceptiveness. She's trying to understand what's best for you. I already know what's best for me, Sofia said matter-of-factly, staying here, with you. What if you had the chance to live with your Tio Roberto? He's family. Sofia finally looked at him, her expression serious beyond her years. Your family too. You take care of me when I'm sick. You help me with homework. You make me feel safe. She paused. Tio Roberto is Papa's family, but you're my family. The distinction hit Marcus hard. In Sofia's mind, family wasn't just about blood. It was about presence, care, consistency. 2 days later, Sarah Kim called with an update. Roberto Hernandez's petition has been fast-tracked. We have a hearing scheduled for next week, and Sofia will need to speak with the judge about her preferences. Is she ready for that? As ready as any 8-year-old can be to advocate for her own future, That evening, Marcus helped Sofia practice what she might say to the judge. They role-played different questions, and Marcus was struck by Sofia's clarity about what she wanted. "I want to stay with Marcus because he loves me and I love him," she said simply, "and because home isn't where you come from, it's where you belong." As they sat together on the couch that night, Sofia fell asleep against Marcus's shoulder while they watched a Disney movie. Marcus looked down at her peaceful face and realized that somewhere between scrambled eggs and bedtime stories, between hospital visits and school plays, he'd stopped being her temporary guardian. He'd become her father. Now he just had to convince a judge that love was more important than DNA. The Cook County Family Court building felt imposing as Marcus and Sofia walked through the metal detectors on a gray Chicago morning. Sofia wore her best dress, a blue one with small flowers that Marcus had bought for her school's spring concert, and carried a folder containing letters from her teachers and a drawing she'd made specifically for the judge. "Remember, just tell the truth," Marcus said as they sat on a bench outside courtroom 402. "The judge wants to know what you think is best for you." Sofia nodded solemnly, her legs swinging from the bench that was too high for her feet to touch the ground. "Marcus, what if the judge doesn't listen to me?" Judges are very good listeners, especially when kids are as smart and brave as you. Sarah Kim approached with a reassuring smile. "Are we ready?" Inside the courtroom, Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he saw Roberto Hernandez for the first time. Sofia's uncle was a stocky man in his 40s, accompanied by his wife and their attorney. He looked like Miguel, which made Marcus's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. Judge Williams was a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the case files before addressing the room. This hearing is to determine the best placement for Sofia Hernandez, age 8, currently in the temporary guardianship of Marcus Thompson. I'll hear from both parties, review the documentation, and speak with Sofia privately. Roberto's attorney spoke first, emphasizing blood ties, cultural connections, and the stability of a two-parent household with other children. Mr. Hernandez can provide Sofia with the traditional family structure she needs, connection to her Latino heritage, and the support of extended family. Sarah Kim countered with documentation of Sofia's adjustment, her academic progress, and the bond she'd formed with Marcus. "Your Honor, Sofia has been thriving in Mr. Thompson's care. Her teachers report improved grades, better social adjustment, and emotional stability. Most importantly, Sofia has clearly expressed her own preferences about her future." Judge Williams studied the files, including letters from Sofia's teacher, her therapist, and even a note from Dr. Chen describing Marcus's initial involvement with the family. "I'd like to speak with Sofia now," the judge said. "Everyone else will wait outside except for the court reporter." Marcus squeezed Sofia's hand as she walked to the front of the courtroom. Through the glass window in the door, he could see her sitting in a chair that looked enormous around her small frame, speaking earnestly to Judge Williams. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When Sofia emerged, her face was serious but determined. "How did it go?" Marcus asked. "I told her the truth," Sofia said simply. Back in the courtroom, Judge Williams addressed both parties. "I've reviewed all documentation, spoken with Sofia, and considered the arguments presented by both sides." Marcus felt his heart hammering in his chest. "While I recognize the importance of family connections and cultural heritage, my primary concern is Sofia's best interests and her own clearly expressed preferences. Sofia has been remarkably articulate about her feelings and her understanding of her situation." The judge paused, looking directly at Sofia. "Sofia, would you like to share with the court what you told me?" Sofia stood up, her voice small but clear. "I told the judge that I love my Tio Roberto, but I don't know him very well. Marcus has taken care of me every day since Mama and Papa had to go away. He helps me with homework, makes me breakfast, and reads me stories. When I have bad dreams, he stays with me until I feel better." She took a breath, her voice growing stronger. "I know Tio Roberto is family because he's Papa's brother, but Marcus is family because he chose to love me. I want to stay with Marcus because he's my home now." Judge Williams nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Hernandez, I want to acknowledge your desire to care for your niece and your genuine concern for her welfare. However, Sofia has been clear about her preferences, and the evidence shows she is thriving in Mr. Thompson's care. Marcus felt, the world hold its breath. Therefore, I'm approving the petition for adoption, pending completion of the standard procedures. Sofia will remain with Mr. Thompson, with provisions for ongoing contact with extended family, including Mr. Hernandez, should all parties agree. The words seemed to echo in the courtroom. Marcus felt Sofia grab his hand, her small fingers intertwining with his. "Marcus," she whispered, "does this mean you're really my dad now?" Marcus knelt down to her level, the same way he had that first night in the hospital emergency room. "If you want me to be." "I do," Sofia said, throwing her arms around his neck. "I really, really do." As they left the courthouse, Marcus realized that what had started as a simple act of compassion, helping a family in crisis, had led to the most important decision of his life. Sometimes the family you choose chooses you. Right back. 3 months after the hearing, Marcus was getting ready for work when Sofia appeared in his bedroom doorway, holding her school backpack and a nervous expression. "Dad," she said, and Marcus still felt his heart skip a beat every time she used that word. "Today is family tree day at school." Marcus sat on his bed, giving her his full attention. "Tell me about it." "We have to draw our family tree and talk about where we come from." Sofia fidgeted with her backpack straps. "I don't know what to say." Marcus understood the complexity of her situation. Sofia's family tree included parents in detention, an uncle in Arizona she barely knew, and a father who looked nothing like her and shared no blood relation. "What do you want to say?" Marcus asked. Sofia climbed onto the bed beside him, spreading out the family tree worksheet. "Can I put Mama and Papa here?" She pointed to the top branches. "Of course. They'll always be your Mama and Papa. And you here?" She pointed to another branch. "Wherever you think I belong." Sofia studied the paper thoughtfully. "Mrs. Rodriguez says families can look different. Some kids have 2 moms, some live with grandparents, some have step-parents." She looked up at Marcus. "I have a Mama and Papa who love me but can't be here, and a dad who chose me. That's pretty special, right?" Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's very special." That afternoon, Marcus picked Sofia up from school, a routine he'd grown to love since switching to day shifts. She ran to the car with excitement, her family tree project clutched in her hand. "Look," she showed him the finished project. At the top were Miguel and Elena, labeled Mama and Papa. They live in my heart. Below them was Marcus, labeled Dad. He takes care of me every day. Around the edges, she'd drawn extended branches for Marcus's parents in Detroit, whom she'd met over video calls, and even Roberto and his family in Arizona, labeled Tio Roberto's family. They want to know me. "It's perfect," Marcus said, and meant it. Mrs. Johnson said it's the most creative family tree she's ever seen. She asked if you could come to our family presentation next week. I wouldn't miss it. That evening, as they worked on homework together at the kitchen table, Sofia looked up from her math worksheet. "Dad, can we call Mama tonight?" The weekly phone calls with Elena had become easier as her immigration case slowly progressed. Elena's lawyer was cautiously optimistic about her chances of eventually returning to the U.S., though it could still take years. When Elena's face appeared on Marcus's laptop screen via the prison's video call system, Sofia lit up. "Mama, look, at my family tree." Elena examined the drawing, her eyes filling with tears as she saw how Sofia had created space for everyone who mattered to her. "Es muy bonito, mija, very beautiful. Marcus helped me with the Spanish words," Sofia said proudly, "and he's learning to make your enchiladas recipe." Elena laughed, looking at Marcus through the screen. "¿Cómo están las enchiladas?" "Terrible," Marcus admitted in Spanish, making both Elena and Sofia giggle. "But I'm getting better." After Sofia went to bed, Marcus stayed on the call with Elena for a few more minutes, something they'd started doing to coordinate parenting decisions and keep Elena involved in Sofia's life. "Marcus, I need to say something," Elena said, her voice serious. "When this all started, I was so scared that Sofia would forget us, forget where she comes from. Elena, I would never... Let me finish. I was wrong to worry. You're not taking her away from us. You're helping her become more herself. She's confident now, happy. She knows she's loved by many people. Marcus felt the weight of Elena's gratitude and trust. She talks about you and Miguel every day. She counts down the days until your next call. I know. And I know that whatever happens with our cases, Sofia has a home. A real home, with someone who loves her like his own. Eleanor paused. Thank you for being the father she needed when we couldn't be her parents. After the call ended, Marcus found himself standing in Sofia's doorway, watching her sleep. The family tree project was propped against her dresser, visible in the light. From the hallway. 8 months ago, Marcus had been a single nurse living alone, focused on his career and simple pleasures. Now his apartment was filled with school artwork, Spanish-English books, and the daily chaos of raising an 8-year-old. He thought about how dramatically his life had changed, how a single act of kindness had led to the most profound relationship of his life. Sofia had needed a guardian, but she'd given him something he hadn't even known he was missing: purpose, unconditional love, and the fierce protective instinct that came with being someone's dad. The next morning brought another milestone. Sofia had asked to invite her new best friend Maya over for a playdate. As Marcus watched the two girls giggling over a board game in the living room, he realized this was what Elena meant about Sofia becoming more herself. She was no longer the scared child from the hospital emergency room. She was a confident, bilingual, bicultural kid who understood that families could be complicated and beautiful at the same time. "Dad," Sofia called from the living room. "Can Maya stay for dinner? I told her you make the best scrambled eggs in Chicago." Marcus laughed, remembering that first disastrous breakfast they'd shared. "I think we can do better than scrambled eggs for a guest. How about we try Mama's enchilada recipe again?" "You sure about that?" "Maya likes adventures," Sofia said with a grin that reminded Marcus exactly why he'd fallen in love with this brave, optimistic little girl. As Marcus headed to the kitchen to attempt another round of Elena's enchiladas, he realized that building a family wasn't about getting everything right the first time. It was about showing up every day, learning together and creating new traditions while honoring old ones. It was about choosing each other, over and over again, one scrambled egg at a time. The Chicago autumn air was crisp as Marcus and Sofia walked through Lincoln Park Zoo, a Saturday tradition they'd developed over the past year. Sofia had grown 3 inches and gained a confidence that made her seem older than her 9 years. "Dad, look," Sofia pointed to the butterfly exhibit they'd visited dozens of times. "Remember when I got my butterfly backpack? You said butterflies meant hope." "Your mama said that," Marcus corrected gently, a habit he'd maintained to keep Elena present in Sofia's daily life. "But you remembered it. That's what dads do. They remember the important things." As they watched monarchs flutter around the enclosed garden, Marcus's phone rang. Linda Rodriguez's name appeared on the screen and Marcus felt his stomach clench with familiar anxiety. Even after the adoption was finalized, calls from DCFS still made him nervous. "Marcus, I have news." "About Elena's case," Linda said. "Her lawyer called this morning. The appeals court overturned the deportation order. She's being released pending a new hearing." Marcus felt the world shift. "When?" "Next week. She'll be in Chicago by Friday." Marcus looked at Sofia, who was pressing her face against the butterfly exhibit glass, completely absorbed in watching a caterpillar work on its cocoon. After 15 months of video calls and letters, she was about to see her mother in person. "How do I tell her?" Marcus asked, carefully. "She's going to have a lot of feelings about this." That evening, after Sofia finished her homework, Marcus sat beside her on the couch where she'd slept that first night in his apartment. "Sofia, Linda called today with news about your mama." Sofia's attention snapped to him immediately. "Is she okay?" "She's more than okay. The judge decided she can. Come back to Chicago. She'll be here next Friday." Sofia stared at him for a long moment, processing. Then unexpectedly she burst into tears. Marcus gathered her into his arms, confused. "Hey, what's wrong? This is good news." "I'm scared," Sofia sobbed into his shoulder. "Scared of what? What if Mama wants me to come live with her? What if she doesn't like who I am now? What if you don't want to be my dad anymore when she's back? Marcus felt his heart break for this little girl who'd learned too young that the adults in her life could disappear without warning. He held her tighter. Sofia, listen to me. I will always be your dad. Always. The adoption papers aren't just for the court, they're a promise. You're my daughter forever, no matter what else changes. But what about Mama? Your Mama loves you so much that she trusted me to take care of you when she couldn't. She's going to be so proud of the amazing person you've become. The week leading up to Elena's release was emotional chaos. Sofia swung between excitement and terror, sometimes within the same hour. Marcus arranged time off work, contacted Sofia's teacher about the situation, and even called Elena's attorney to understand what her legal status would be. Friday morning arrived grey and drizzly. Marcus and Sofia drove to the detention facility in Wisconsin, where Elena was being processed for release. Sofia had barely slept, and she clutched a letter she'd written to her mother, along with photos from the past year. When Elena walked through the release doors, Marcus barely recognized her. She'd lost weight and looked older, but her face transformed when she saw Sofia running toward her. The reunion was everything Marcus had expected. Tears, Spanish words spoken too fast for him to follow, Elena dropping to her knees to hold her daughter. But what he hadn't expected was Elena looking at him over Sofia's head with an expression of such profound gratitude that it took his breath away. "She's so tall," Elena said in English, tears streaming down her face. "And confident. Look how confident she is." Later, at a restaurant near the facility, Marcus watched Elena and Sofia catch up over lunch. Sofia showed her mother every photo on Marcus's phone, told her about school friends, soccer practice, and her latest art projects. But she also stayed close to Marcus, holding his hand under the table. "Mama," Sofia said carefully, "Marcus is my dad now, legally and everything, but you're still my mama." Elena looked at Marcus, then back at Sofia. "Mija, having more people love you is never a problem. It's a blessing." That afternoon, Elena came to see Marcus's apartment, Sofia's home for the past 15 months. She walked through the small space, taking in the Spanish-English books, the photos of Miguel that Marcus had framed and displayed, the butterfly decorations that had become Sofia's trademark. "You kept us alive for her," Elena said quietly as Sofia showed her the bedroom Marcus had created specifically for her. "She kept herself alive. I just provided the safe space for her to do it." Elena studied Marcus's face. "You love her. It wasn't a question. More than I knew was possible. And she loves you. I can see it in how she looks at you, how she moves around you, like you're her safe place." That evening, as they discussed the future over takeout Chinese food, the complexity of their situation became clear. Elena would be staying in a transitional housing program while her immigration case continued. She'd found a job through a church sponsor and was determined to rebuild her life in Chicago. "I want to be part of Sofia's life again," Elena said, "but I understand that things have changed." Sofia, who'd been quietly listening to the adult conversation, spoke up. "Can I have 2 homes? Like Maya at school. She lives with her mom for the week and her dad on weekends." Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. It wasn't a traditional custody arrangement, but nothing about their situation was traditional. "Would you like that?" Marcus asked Sofia. "I want to be with both of you. You're both my parents now." 6 months later, they'd found their rhythm. Sofia spent 3 nights a week with Elena in her small apartment near Pilsen, learning to cook traditional recipes and maintaining her Spanish fluency. The other 4 nights, she was with Marcus doing homework at their kitchen table and maintaining the routines they'd built together. It wasn't perfect. Coordinating schedules was complicated, and Sofia sometimes struggled with the transitions. But she was thriving in a way that amazed everyone who knew her story. On a warm spring evening, exactly 2 years after that first night in the Cook County Hospital emergency room, Marcus was helping Sofia with a school project about immigration stories. She was interviewing Elena about her journey from Mexico, taking careful notes in both English and Spanish. "Mama, what was the hardest part?" Sofia asked. Elena thought for a moment. Being separated from you, but also the hardest part became the most beautiful part. What do you mean? Because losing you for a while led to you gaining Marcus, and now instead of having 2 parents, you have 3 people who would do anything for you. Sofia looked between Elena and Marcus, then at Miguel's photo on the side table. 4, she corrected. Papa loves me too, even from far away. Later that night, after Elena had gone home and Sofia was asleep, Marcus sat in his kitchen grading papers from the nursing students he'd started teaching part-time. On the refrigerator, held up by butterfly magnets, was Sofia's latest artwork, a family portrait showing Elena, Marcus, Sofia, and Miguel all holding hands under a rainbow. At the bottom, in Sofia's careful handwriting, were the words, "My family is bigger than most people's, and that makes me lucky." Marcus smiled, remembering the scared nurse who'd made a few phone calls 2 years ago, thinking he was just helping a family in crisis for one night. He'd had no idea that single act of compassion would lead to becoming a father, navigating immigration law, learning to cook Mexican food, and co-parenting with a woman who trusted him with her most precious gift. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Sofia forgot her library book at my apartment. I'll bring it to school tomorrow. Thank you for everything, Marcus. Miguel and I always knew Sofia was special, but you helped her become who she was meant to be." Marcus typed back, "She made me who I was meant to be too." Outside, Chicago hummed with its familiar night sounds, traffic, sirens, the EL train in the distance. But inside Marcus's apartment, all was quiet except for the soft breathing of a 9-year-old girl who'd taught him that family isn't just about who you start with. Sometimes it's about who you find along the way, who you choose to love and who chooses to love you back. Sometimes just wanting to help becomes the most important thing you'll ever do.